I'm Ryan, 31, married to Emily for about 5 years now. Honestly, we've had a good marriage up until recently. Or at least, that's what I thought. We've always been pretty solid, or so I assumed. She's a few years older than me, but not by much. We've always had a great time together, went on trips, cooked dinner, all the usual stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary, or at least that's how it felt. But in the past few months, something's been off. Little things at first. Emily started acting distant. At first, I thought it was just stress from work or maybe we were both in a bit of a rut. She works a lot, has a pretty demanding job in marketing, and I get that. But it got weird. She started spending more time at the office, staying late a lot more often than she ever used to. I'd ask about her day, and she'd get super vague. Like, oh, just the usual or nothing interesting, and that's not like her. She's always been more open, you know? She'd tell me little details, even about boring stuff. But now? It's like I'm talking to a stranger sometimes. I didn't really want to overthink it, because I've never been the type to jump to conclusions. Maybe she was stressed about something at work. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But I started noticing her being weirdly defensive, like when I asked her about the late hours. She'd snap at me, "Can you not just trust me for once?" Or "I don't need to explain everything to you." Stuff like that. And sure, maybe I was pushing her too much, but when your wife starts being defensive over the simplest things, it messes with your head. There was also the whole thing where she started being really protective of her phone. Like, she'd take it with her everywhere. When she went to the bathroom, when she'd be cooking in the kitchen, it didn't matter. She'd never been like that before. And if I asked her about it, she'd get all bitchy and say stuff like, "Why do you care so much about my phone? Are you really that insecure?" Anyway, I started brushing it off. I told myself I was being stupid. Maybe it was just a phase, or maybe I was overreacting. But the weirdness kept piling up. The more I tried to ignore it, the worse it got. And now I'm here, staring down at the wreckage of what used to feel like a normal marriage, and honestly, I have no idea what to do next. But that's not even the worst part. I'll get to that in the next post. I don't even know how to say this, but... Alright, so here's where things really started to take a turn for the worse. I mean, I had my suspicions before, but this is when I couldn't just ignore it anymore. A few weeks ago, I got home from work a little early, maybe 4:30 or so. Emily wasn't home yet, but her car was in the driveway. That was normal, she always came home later than me, but what wasn't normal was the fact that her phone was sitting on the kitchen counter. I know, I shouldn't have snooped. But in the back of my mind, something was telling me that this was my chance to figure out what was going on. She'd been acting so off lately, and her phone was this strange, almost sacred object that she never put down. So there it was, sitting right there. No one else was home, and I figured if I was going to get any answers, now was as good a time as any. I told myself I was just gonna look at the screen, you know? Just to see if there was anything weird in the notifications. I didn't plan to go all the way and open messages or anything. But as soon as I picked it up, the screen lit up and, this part still makes my stomach turn, there was a text from some guy named Chris. I didn't recognize the name, so I did what anyone would do, I clicked it. And what I found? Let's just say I didn't need to look any further. The message was pretty casual, like "Can't wait to see you tonight," and "Don't forget the room key." Winky face, there were a couple of smiley faces, and even one that had a kiss emoji. I don't know why, but that damn kiss emoji hit me like a ton of bricks. That felt like the moment when the little cracks in my reality turned into an actual fracture. I froze for a second, trying to figure out what the hell I was reading. But it didn't take long for me to start going through the rest of the messages. They were all like that, flirty, secretive, like they had some inside joke or something. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my head was spinning. I couldn't focus, but I kept reading. There were messages that hinted at more plans for later, vague talk about what time they'd meet, and how she was excited for their time together. I don't know how long I was standing there, but it felt like hours. I had the proof in front of me. I knew what was going on, but my brain kept trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it was innocent. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Then I saw something else. A receipt. It was tucked under the phone case, and I almost missed it, but I saw the name Emily on it. It was a confirmation for a hotel room. The date was for last weekend. The same weekend she told me she was going to be working late on a big project. I felt like I was drowning. There it was, Proof. I don't even know what made me keep looking, but I went further. There was a picture of her with this guy, Chris, I guess his full name's Christopher, but whatever, taken in some kind of dimly lit bar. She was sitting on his lap, laughing, all cozy with him like they were an item. I don't even know how I didn't lose my mind right there in the kitchen. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel like the woman I'd been married to. But there it was, right in front of me, my wife was cheating on me. At that moment, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I didn't want to scream or throw things. What I felt most of all was this deep, suffocating sadness. I didn't even know what to do with it. I left the kitchen and just sat on the couch for a while, staring at the wall, trying to process everything. I could hear the door open, Emily's voice calling out like she hadn't just destroyed everything I thought I knew about her. I was numb. I was in shock. Part of me just wanted to pretend I didn't see anything, act like everything was fine. But I knew it wasn't. How could it be? She came into the living room a few minutes later, and the first thing she said was, "What's up? You look weird." The nerve. I could barely look at her. The worst part? I didn't say anything. Not a word. I didn't confront her, didn't ask her about Chris, didn't even bring up the hotel receipt. I just pretended like I hadn't found anything. Because deep down, I think I was hoping I'd wake up from some nightmare and it would all turn out to be some twisted mistake. But I didn't. And I knew then that I had to face what was happening. I went through the motions for the rest of that night like a zombie. Emily and I ate dinner in awkward silence. Nothing was normal, but I didn't know how to bring it up. It felt like the world was spinning around me, and I was just standing there, stuck in place. She didn't seem to notice how off I was. She kept talking about work like usual, and I just nodded along, my mind replaying that receipt, the texts, the damn kiss emoji. I could barely keep my eyes on her, but she was oblivious, still acting like everything was fine. Every time I looked at her, I saw a stranger. The woman I thought I knew didn't exist anymore. At one point, she asked if I was okay because I was so quiet. But I just said I was tired. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing how much it was eating me up inside. I thought maybe I should confront her right there, ask her about the hotel, about Chris, about everything. But something inside me stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to face the truth. Maybe I was still hoping there was some other explanation, some other way out. That night, I lay in bed next to her, just staring at the ceiling. Emily had fallen asleep, and I couldn't. I was thinking about everything, how long this had been going on, how she'd lied to me for who knows how long, and how I was supposed to just live like this, with this person who had betrayed me so completely. I couldn't even touch her. It felt wrong. But I didn't know how to fix it either. The next day, everything was tense. It was like I was walking around in a fog. I went to work, and I barely got anything done. I couldn't focus. My head was spinning with the thought of her, of what I'd found, and of how I hadn't confronted her yet. I knew I needed to say something, but I kept putting it off. Maybe I was too scared. I kept thinking, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being paranoid? But that was a lie. I wasn't being paranoid. I had the evidence, clear as day. I wasn't imagining things. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to face her. She came home late that night again, all smiles, talking about how her boss was happy with the work she'd done. Same old story. Nothing had changed on her end. I couldn't help but feel a sick sense of irony. She was living her life, completely unaware that I knew everything. And I just sat there. I felt like a coward. At one point, I tried to talk to her. I started asking her about her day, just casually, like I hadn't seen everything on her phone. But she gave me that same vague answer, that nothing exciting line. I didn't press her. I didn't ask about the hotel or Chris. I didn't ask her about the fact that she'd been avoiding me for weeks. Instead, I just said, okay, and let it drop. But inside, I was dying. I hated myself for not saying something. For not confronting her. I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I knew it would. I was playing this stupid game, letting her lie to my face, and I hated myself for it. The worst part? I wasn't even sure what I was waiting for. I guess I was waiting for her to finally admit it, maybe to come clean, maybe to tell me it wasn't as bad as it seemed. I wanted her to break down and apologize, to take back everything that had hurt me. But I wasn't sure if I'd even believe her if she did. The following weekend, I decided to take a day off. I needed space. I needed to clear my head. I thought about going to see a friend, maybe talking to someone about all of this, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want to admit to anyone what was going on. It felt too humiliating. I couldn't imagine sitting down with a buddy and telling him, "Hey, my wife is cheating on me." So instead, I spent the day alone. I thought about driving out of town or even going for a walk, but I couldn't shake the feeling that if I left, something bad would happen. Like I was giving her the chance to sneak off with Chris again. So I stayed home, pacing around the house, feeling the weight of this decision pressing down on me. And still, Emily acted like everything was normal. She went out with some friends that evening. Just a girls' night, she said. No big deal. It didn't even hit me until later that night, when I saw the phone again. It was just sitting there on the couch, like it was mocking me. But this time, when I picked it up, something was different. Her phone was unlocked. She must have forgotten to lock it. And for some reason, I knew what I had to do. So I went through her messages again. I didn't want to. I really didn't, but I couldn't stop myself. I found more messages from Chris. It was like they had this whole coded language. But this time, there was something different. Something that made the blood drain from my face. There was a plan for tomorrow night. A hotel booking under her name, with a message saying, "I'll see you then, baby. Can't wait." And then, right at the end of the thread, she had sent him a photo of us, the two of us at a wedding we went to last year. She had taken the time to send him a picture of us together, smiling, clearly happy. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I couldn't breathe. I was shaking. I had all the proof I needed, and still, I couldn't make myself confront her. Instead, I just sat there on the couch, holding her phone, staring at the screen like it was some kind of sick joke. So, after finding all that, I thought I might finally confront her. But even with everything right there in front of me, I couldn't do it. I kept thinking about how I'd feel after I did. Would I even get the truth? Would she just lie and gaslight me some more? And if I confronted her, where would that leave me? I didn't know. It felt like I was staring at a cliff, and I didn't know if I could jump. I spent the rest of the night just sitting there, holding her phone, waiting for her to come home. She finally walked in, as cheerful as ever, like she hadn't just shattered everything I thought I knew about her. I couldn't even look at her. She asked how my day had gone, and I gave some vague response, like it didn't matter. I barely heard her. I could feel the anger building up in me, but it wasn't anger toward her yet. It was self-doubt. Was I really going to destroy everything over this? Was I being too harsh? I had the proof, but I still couldn't make myself pull the trigger. The next morning, she left for work, and I was left with all this evidence and all these questions. I felt like a coward, like I was letting her walk all over me. But there was this part of me that still didn't want to lose her, even though I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. I think that's when I realized, I wasn't just scared of her lying to me. I was scared of what would happen if I really knew the truth. If I confronted her, things would change forever. And that terrified me. But I knew, sooner or later, I'd have to make a decision. Because living in this limbo, knowing but not confronting it, was slowly killing me. I'm not proud of what happened next, but I couldn't keep pretending that everything was normal. Something snapped inside me. It was a few days after I found the texts and the hotel booking. I had tried to keep it together, to keep acting like I didn't know what was going on. But every time I looked at Emily, every time I heard her voice, I felt like I was drowning in this lie. It was eating me alive. I couldn't take it anymore. That afternoon, Emily came home earlier than usual. I was sitting on the couch, just staring at the TV, trying to look like I wasn't completely falling apart. She walked in, smiled, and asked, "What's up? You're really quiet today." She always asked that, like everything was fine. I just looked at her. I don't even know what I was waiting for, maybe for her to admit it first, maybe for some kind of crack in her perfect little world where everything was fine. But I couldn't wait any longer. The silence was suffocating. "Who's Chris?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her smile faltered for a second, just a split second, but I saw it. It was almost imperceptible. Then she quickly recovered, her eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about." "I saw the messages," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but failing miserably. There was this horrible pause. She didn't say anything. She didn't even look sorry. Instead, she got defensive, like she always did when I started asking questions she didn't want to answer. "What the hell are you implying?" she snapped. "Why are you going through my phone? You don't trust me." I didn't say anything. I just stood up, my hand shaking, and held the phone out to her. "I found this," I said, showing her the texts. The hotel receipt. The picture of us, the one she sent to him. I don't think she even looked at it at first. She just stared at me, like she couldn't believe I had the nerve to bring it up. Then she laughed. I swear she laughed. "This is what this is about," she said. "You've lost your mind, Ryan. It's nothing. It's nothing." I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. "How is that nothing? You've been lying to me. Sneaking around behind my back." She crossed her arms and gave me this look, like she was the one who'd been wronged. "You're acting insane. I'm not cheating on you. Chris is just a friend. You've got issues, Ryan." I swear the way she said it, like I was the one who was crazy for asking, made my blood boil. But I couldn't argue with her. The more I tried to push her on it, the more she shut me down, getting angrier and more defensive. The lies kept coming, one after another. "It's not what you think. You're just insecure. You need to trust me." I stood there, feeling like a fool, holding her phone out like it was some kind of evidence in a court case, but it didn't matter. She was denying it all. And I didn't know what to say anymore. What was the point of confronting her if she wasn't going to be honest? If she wasn't even sorry? In the end, I just dropped the phone on the table and walked out. I didn't even wait for her response. I couldn't stand looking at her anymore. I didn't care if she was telling the truth or not. I was done. I spent the rest of the night at a buddy's place, drinking a little too much, talking about everything that had happened. I wasn't angry yet, just numb. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to give. The next morning, I came back home, and Emily acted like nothing had changed. She was still trying to act like everything was normal, like she hadn't just been caught in a lie. But for me, it was over. I knew it was over. There was no going back. But I still wasn't sure what to do next. I didn't know if I should walk away, or if I should try to fight for what was left of us. It felt like my whole world had just turned upside down. The days after the confrontation were some of the hardest. Emily and I were living in the same house, but it felt like we were strangers. She barely looked at me, and when she did, it was like she was annoyed, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I didn't know how to act. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to force her to admit everything, but the other part of me was just so damn tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of feeling like I couldn't trust a single thing she said. She still acted like nothing had changed. She went to work, kept her routine, all that. But everything felt off. Even the way she moved around the house felt different. The silence between us was so thick, I could barely stand it. It was like living in a house that used to be a home, but now it was just a shell. I tried talking to her once, asking if we could sit down and talk about everything. I needed answers. But she just brushed me off with some excuse, "I'm tired. I'll deal with it later." Later never came. I was stuck in limbo. I didn't know if I should just walk away or keep pushing for some kind of closure. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, I didn't want to be married to someone who was lying to me. Someone who thought I was the crazy one for asking questions. I spent the weekend going through everything again, her phone, the receipts, the messages. It felt like I was torturing myself. But I had to know. I needed the truth, even if I didn't want to hear it. But when I thought about confronting her again, I just couldn't. I didn't know if I was ready for the fallout. I didn't know if I could handle the finality of it all. So I stayed in that uncomfortable silence, unsure of what came next, unsure of what to do with all the hurt and doubt hanging over me. I knew things couldn't stay like this, but I also knew I couldn't keep pretending either. The tipping point came when I couldn't take the silence any longer. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay, and I couldn't stay in this gray area where I knew what was going on but wasn't confronting it. It felt like I was suffocating, just existing in this empty half-lived space. I knew I needed to have the talk. The real one. No more dancing around the issue, no more hoping things would magically go back to normal. I wasn't sure if I was ready for the fallout, but I was sure as hell ready to get the truth. If this marriage was going to end, I wanted it to be on my terms. I wasn't going to let her keep playing me for a fool. So that night, after she came home from work, Just like every other night, I said it. We need to talk. For real this time. She froze. I saw it in her face before she even spoke. She knew exactly where this was going. She started with her usual defensive act, the same tired lines she always used. I don't have time for this, Ryan. I'm tired, okay? But I didn't back down. No. We are going to talk about this. About you and Chris. About what's really going on. Her face shifted for a second, just a flash of something, guilt maybe? I didn't know. But it was gone as quickly as it came. Then came the walls. The lies. She told me it was nothing, just a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting. It's not what you think, she said. He's just a friend, okay? I almost laughed. It was like she was reading from some handbook on how to gaslight your husband. But I couldn't laugh. It wasn't funny. I was so far beyond that point. I slammed the phone down in front of her. You think I don't see what's going on? You think I don't know you've been lying to me? I've seen the texts. I saw the hotel booking. I saw the damn pictures. Stop pretending like I'm the crazy one. She didn't argue. She didn't try to defend herself. She just went silent. For a moment, it was like the air in the room shifted, and we were both just standing there, staring at each other. I could see the weight of everything on her face, the guilt she couldn't hide anymore. Finally, she spoke, quietly, almost defeated. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I never meant for you to find out this way. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? She wasn't sorry because of what she did to me. She was sorry because she got caught. I took a deep breath. So what now? You're just going to keep lying to me, or are you going to finally tell me the truth? She didn't respond. She just stared at me like I'd ripped the floor out from under her. But then she opened her mouth again, and when she spoke, it wasn't the same defensive tone she'd used before. It was softer, like she was finally giving in. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But I've been unhappy for a long time, Ryan. I didn't know how to talk to you about it, So you slept with another guy? I cut her off, feeling my heart pound in my chest. She looked down, not meeting my eyes. It just happened. I don't know what to say. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't thinking about you, or us, or anything. I just needed to feel wanted again. I wanted to yell at her. I wanted to scream and make her feel every ounce of pain she'd caused. But instead, I just stood there, feeling empty. Like the anger had drained out of me, and all that was left was this overwhelming sadness. I could have tried to fix it. I could have begged her to stay, tried to work through it, but I knew deep down that it was over. We couldn't come back from this. There was no going back to what we had. She was still looking at me, waiting for some kind of reaction. But all I could say was, I need you to leave. And just like that, she did. She didn't argue, didn't beg. She just grabbed her things, walked out the door, and left. The silence after Emily left was deafening. I hadn't expected it to hit me so hard, but it did. I thought I'd feel relief, but I just felt empty. My whole life had been built around this marriage, and now it was gone. It felt like a part of me had been ripped out, and all I was left with was this raw, hollow space. For days, I just moved through the motions. Work, eat, sleep, none of it mattered anymore. I kept thinking about the past, about all the good moments we'd had, and wondering where it all went wrong. Had I missed the signs? Was this my fault? I kept questioning myself, trying to figure out if there was something I could have done differently, even though deep down I knew this wasn't on me. The hardest part was the emptiness. The house felt huge without her. There was no more laughing, no more shared dinners, no more plans for the future. It was just me, sitting in the quiet, trying to figure out how to rebuild my life. I tried reaching out to a few friends, but honestly, I didn't know what to say. They'd seen us together, they'd known how much I loved her. I wasn't ready to explain everything to them, so I just kept quiet. It felt easier that way. After a week, I packed up some of her things, clothes, her stuff from the bathroom, and put it all in a box. It didn't feel cathartic or freeing like I thought it would. It just made everything more real. I wasn't sure where to go from here. Do I move on? Do I try to fix myself? Or do I just keep living with this hurt, pretending I'm okay when I'm not? I wasn't sure of anything anymore, except that this chapter of my life had ended. And even though I wasn't sure what came next, I knew I couldn't keep looking back. A week after Emily left, I got a call. I wasn't expecting it. I'd gone through 100 scenarios in my head about how this might play out, but never like this. It was Emily. At first, I didn't even pick up. I just stared at the phone, my finger hovering over the screen. I wasn't ready to talk to her. I couldn't be. I had been trying so hard to move on, to focus on something, anything, other than her. But something about seeing her name on the screen made my chest tighten. I let it ring out. She left a voicemail. I don't even know why I listened to it. But I did. Her voice sounded fragile, like she was on the verge of tears. Ryan. I know I don't deserve it, but I need to talk. Please. I messed up, and I don't know what to do anymore. I miss you. I miss us. Can we just talk? Please. That last word hung in the air, echoing in my mind long after the voicemail ended. I stared at my phone, not knowing what to do. I wanted to ignore it, to move on, to never hear from her again. But a part of me still missed her. Despite everything, I missed the woman I thought I knew. I missed the life we had, before all the lies, before the betrayal. But then I thought about everything, the lies, the cheating, the way she'd hurt me. I remembered the way she'd looked at me when I confronted her. The coldness. The excuses. The way she hadn't even seemed sorry until she realized she was losing me. I didn't call her back. I couldn't. Not yet. But, damn it, I wasn't sure what I wanted. Was I being too harsh? Should I hear her out? Or was this just another one of her manipulations? I had no idea. All I knew was that I wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. I needed time. For now, I let the voicemail sit unanswered. And I realized something. Maybe the hardest part wasn't losing her. It was figuring out how to forgive myself for letting her in so deeply, for trusting her the way I did. It's been another few days since the voicemail. Emily hadn't called again, and part of me was relieved. I knew I needed space, but a part of me still felt this tug, like I was waiting for something or someone to tell me how to feel, how to move forward. Then, out of nowhere, she showed up at my door. I didn't even hear her knock. I was sitting on the couch, trying to drown out the thoughts in my head with some stupid movie, when I heard her voice. Ryan, can we talk? I froze. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, but the other part just, I don't know, I wanted to hear her out. I hadn't heard her voice in so long, and I needed to know, did she really care? Or was this just another game? I opened the door. She looked different, a little more tired than I remembered. The makeup was gone, and her hair was messier than usual. She looked human, vulnerable, maybe even a little scared. But it didn't matter. The damage had been done. I've been thinking, she started, standing there awkwardly. About everything. About us. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, waiting for her to keep talking. I know what I did was wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I miss you, Ryan. I miss us. And I messed everything up. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her how much she'd hurt me, how everything had changed. But instead, I just nodded. It was like I was paralyzed. My heart was pounding, my mind racing, but I didn't have the words. I'm not asking for us to get back together right now, she said, almost pleading. I know I need to prove that I can be trusted. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I stared at her for a moment. It was so hard, looking at her like this. There was a part of me that wanted to forgive her, to give her a chance, but I couldn't. Not yet. You're right, I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. You did mess everything up. I trusted you, Emily. And you broke that trust. She winced at the words, but I didn't stop. And I don't know if I can ever trust you again. There was this long, heavy silence between us. She was looking at me, her eyes filled with regret, but I couldn't feel sorry for her. I couldn't. She destroyed something I'd valued, and it was hard to pretend I didn't feel the weight of that. I'm not asking you to, she whispered. I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I want to try. I just want the chance to make it right. I shook my head. I didn't know what she was expecting me to say. I couldn't give her what she wanted. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Maybe someday we can talk, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But right now, I need space. I need time to figure out if this is even something worth fixing. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't. But I couldn't keep pretending. Not for her. Not for me. She nodded, her face pale and defeated. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling like I'd just cut a part of myself loose. The door clicked shut behind her, and I was left alone again. This time, I wasn't sure if I felt any better, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I needed time. Time to heal. Time to think about whether she was worth the risk of opening up again. The next few days were a blur. Emily didn't call, didn't text, and for the most part, I didn't hear from her. At first, I thought maybe that was a good thing. Space, right? I needed time to clear my head, to decide whether I was done, or if there was something left to salvage. But the silence was brutal. The house felt even emptier than before, and the absence of her started to weigh on me more than I'd expected. I kept replaying everything in my mind, the good moments, the bad moments, the whole damn roller coaster of it all. I hated the way my brain kept going back to those first few years when everything felt perfect, when we were happy. But then I remembered the lies. The secrecy. The way she acted like I was the crazy one when I asked about it. And the hotel receipt. The damn hotel receipt. That one hit me the hardest. I couldn't shake the image of her staying somewhere with him. It didn't matter that she said it was a mistake, or that she was unhappy. It didn't make it any easier to forget. I spent a lot of time thinking about my options. There were a lot of people who'd say I should just move on. Cut my losses, walk away, and never look back. I wasn't sure if that was the answer. It felt too final. Too cold. But what was the alternative? Letting her back in after everything? Trusting her again? I couldn't answer that. Not yet. I spent more time at work, trying to bury myself in tasks that didn't require any real thought. But my mind kept drifting back to her. I knew it wasn't healthy. I knew I should be focusing on me, on what I wanted moving forward. But every time I thought about letting go, about ending this for good, I felt like I was losing something, losing everything. I reached out to my buddy, Steve. He was the one who'd been there for me through everything, the one who'd told me to confront Emily in the first place. He'd seen the cracks in our relationship before I did. Dude, I don't know what to do, I told him one night over the phone. It feels like I'm stuck in this, in-between space. Like, I know she messed up, but part of me wants to give her another chance. Steve was quiet for a second, probably trying to figure out how to phrase what he was about to say. Then he said, "Ryan, you have to think about what's best for you. Not what's best for her. Not what's best for some idea of what you thought you had. What do you want? What's gonna help you move on?" I didn't have an answer. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I just let out a deep sigh. I don't know, man. I don't know what's best for me. Steve let me sit in that silence for a minute. Then he added, "Sometimes, the hardest part isn't cutting someone out. It's accepting that you're better off without them. Even if it doesn't feel like it now." That hit me harder than I thought it would. I wasn't ready to admit it, not yet. But it was true. The hardest part of this whole thing wasn't the betrayal. It was the idea of losing her. Of losing the life we had built. Even if that life was built on lies. I spent the rest of the evening thinking about Steve's words. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with them, but they stuck. I had to start thinking about what was best for me. About what would help me heal. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to realize that moving on might be the only way forward. But I still wasn't ready to make that decision. Not yet. A few more days passed. Emily didn't reach out, and I didn't make the first move either. I guess I was still waiting for some kind of sign, some clarity, like a moment of aha that would tell me what I should do next. But nothing came. Just silence. Then one night, I got a text. It was from her. Just a simple message. "Can we talk? I miss you." I stared at it for a minute, my thumb hovering over the screen. I had so many things to say to her, so many things I wanted to get off my chest. But I couldn't reply in that moment. It wasn't even the hurt anymore, it was the anger. It was the anger that had been simmering under the surface for weeks. The anger at her lies, at the way she took me for granted. At the way she thought she could just walk back into my life after everything she'd done. I spent hours going back and forth, reading and rereading the message. I wanted to tell her to screw off, to leave me alone. But at the same time, a part of me didn't want to be cruel. I still remembered the good times we had, and I didn't want to completely shut her out. So I did nothing. I didn't respond. I just put my phone down and tried to sleep. But the next morning, I woke up with a different feeling, a new kind of anger. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was this fire, this feeling that maybe I didn't have to play the nice guy anymore. I didn't have to be the one who was always trying to keep the peace, always swallowing my pride to keep things calm. I needed to tell her how much she'd hurt me. I needed her to feel it, to understand the damage she'd caused, even if she didn't care. So I finally replied, but not in the way she probably expected. You don't get to miss me. You lost that right when you decided to lie to me and sleep with someone else. I'm done with the lies, Emily. And I'm done with you. I sent it, and for the first time in a while, I felt this weight lift off my shoulders. The anger wasn't gone, but at least now, I didn't feel like I was the one being walked on. She didn't reply immediately. But a few hours later, my phone buzzed again. She'd sent a long message, filled with apologies and excuses. It didn't matter anymore. I read it, but I didn't reply. I was done playing this game. Now for the first time, I felt like I was moving forward. Even if it wasn't the way I thought I would. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Emily's message kept lingering in my head, but I didn't let myself respond. I thought about it sometimes, what I'd say if I saw her again, how I would feel if she actually showed up. But I didn't expect her to come back. Then, out of nowhere, she showed up at my door again. This time, there was no warning. No text. No heads up. She just knocked, like she had the right to. Like nothing had changed. I wasn't ready for it. I opened the door, feeling the anger rise before I even saw her face. She looked different again. She was standing there in the same old clothes she used to wear around the house, but her face was pale. Tired. Almost like she hadn't been sleeping. Her eyes were a little red, like she'd been crying. Ryan, I didn't know where else to go, she said, voice shaking slightly. I stood there, speechless for a moment. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, tell her to get lost and never come back. But another part of me felt this weird tug, like I couldn't just close the door on everything we'd shared, even after everything that happened. It felt like an impossible choice. Why are you here? I finally asked, my voice low. I didn't want to be rude, but I was tired of playing the game where she'd act like everything was fine. I need to see you. I need you to understand how sorry I am. I made a huge mistake. Please, just let me explain. I can't lose you like this, Ryan. She said it like she actually cared. Like she wasn't just trying to cover her tracks. But I knew better now. I had the receipts. I knew the truth. And that truth was enough to break something inside of me. You really think you can just show up here and act like everything's okay? I said, my voice coming out sharper than I meant. You can't just undo everything, Emily. You can't just show up and expect me to forget what you did. She flinched at my words, but she didn't back away. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes pleading. I know I can't undo it. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I need you to know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I love you, Ryan. I always loved you. The words hit me harder than I thought they would. The love part. Because deep down, I still remembered the woman I married. I remembered how she used to say those words and how I used to believe them. But now they felt empty. I didn't know if they were genuine or just another manipulation. I took a deep breath, trying to clear my head. You can't just fix this with words, Emily. You can't just show up here, cry a little, and expect me to take you back. You've broken my trust. You broke us. Her face fell. She looked like she was on the verge of breaking down completely. I saw the regret in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo the damage she'd done. Not this time. I just don't know what to do anymore, she whispered. I feel like I lost the best thing I ever had. I shook my head slowly, stepping back from the door. Maybe you did. And with that, I closed the door. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a moment of catharsis or sudden clarity. But it was a moment of me standing up for myself. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her back in so easily. Not after everything. The door clicked shut, and I leaned against it, breathing heavily. I wasn't sure if I'd made the right choice. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally doing what was best for me. The days that followed were quieter. Emily didn't come by again. No more texts, no more calls. It was like she'd taken the hint, and I was left to deal with the aftermath. The first few nights were tough. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about her constantly. I still missed her, or at least the version of her I thought I knew. The loneliness crept in, and I had to fight the urge to reach out to her, to ask if we could start over, to see if there was anything worth saving. But each time I thought about it, I remembered that feeling. That sick feeling in my stomach when I'd found out what she'd done. That feeling of being betrayed, of realizing that someone you trusted had been lying to your face for so long. I couldn't just pretend it hadn't happened. I didn't know what my future held, but I knew I had to keep moving forward. No more looking back. I started focusing more on myself. I started going to the gym, getting back into a routine. I even hung out with Steve more, just to get my mind off things. We went out for drinks a couple of times, talked about random stuff, nothing too heavy. I didn't need more drama. I just needed to clear my head. And little by little, the ache started to fade. It didn't go away completely. I don't think it ever will. But I started to see things more clearly. I realized that I didn't need her to be happy. I didn't need to put myself through the pain of wondering if she'd ever change, if she'd ever be the person I thought she was. I was better off without the uncertainty, without the constant wondering. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing for sure: I was done living in the past. And if Emily ever reached out again, I wasn't sure I'd be ready to hear her out. Not yet. Not until I was sure that I had healed enough to even consider it. For now, I was focused on moving forward. No more letting her pull me back. It's been a few months now, and things feel different. Not perfect. I don't think things ever go back to perfect after something like this, but different. I've started finding my rhythm again. I've been focusing on myself, hanging out with friends, even doing things I never had time for before. I've reconnected with parts of myself that got lost somewhere along the way. I'm not saying I'm over it, or that I've forgotten everything that happened. Far from it. There are days when I still get that pang in my chest, that flash of memory, and I wonder how I ended up here. How I ended up alone after everything. But here's the thing, I don't feel as lost anymore. I don't feel as stuck in that place I was a few months ago, when it felt like I was drowning in confusion and anger. Then last week, Emily reached out again. Just a text, simple, as usual. Hey, can we talk? I've been thinking about you. I won't lie, I stared at that message for a while. I thought about deleting it, about blocking her number and moving on completely. But then I paused. I asked myself, do I need this? Do I need closure from her? Do I need her to apologize again? And the answer? No. I didn't. What I needed was to keep moving forward. For the first time in months, I felt like I was starting to understand that I didn't need her approval or her apology to feel whole again. I didn't reply. I don't know if that was the right choice. Maybe it was cowardly. Maybe it was the beginning of finally letting go for good. But either way, I realized something important. I'm done waiting for answers. I'm done letting her dictate my peace. And honestly, it feels good.